Thank you, Kyle.
Yeah.
So my presentation was called Ready, Cite, Read, not Ready, Set, Read. Ready, Cite, Read. So I had the wonderful opportunity to work with Miss Katie Jewell and Mr. Aaron Wood of Coldwater Public Schools this semester for my student teaching. So my classes kind of looked like we had 5th grade band, we had guitar class, we have 7th and 8th grade band, film music, which is super fun to teach, by the way, and marching band and concert band. So I see about a total of about like over 250 kids per day, which is a lot of kids. So because of, one second. So because of the great broad spectrum of students that I was looking at, I had to decide what my project was going to be, and it was kind of overwhelming at first. However, I came to the conclusion after spending some time with the marching band and the 7th and 8th grade band at Lake Middle School, I realized that they have a very, very distinct way of doing sight reading. And sight reading is what musicians, for people who are not music savvy, sight reading is what we call when we get our piece of music for the very, very first time, and the process that we follow in order to do that first playthrough of music. So I decided, after seeing the students of the high school using this, I thought, well, how would it affect the beginning band and introducing sight reading to beginning band in an early way and trying different approaches to it? So for my teacher research, I decided to work with the 5th graders in beginning band at Lakeland Elementary. So my question. So as I said, high school bands had a very common sight reading technique, which really included, we first pass out the music, then we talk about the roadmap. Our roadmap is what we refer to fermatas. Are there fermatas? Are there repeats? Are there breath marks? So other things, basically anything besides the notes written on the page. We ask the kids, okay, circle anything kind of weird that you see in the music. And then that kind of sparked my curiosity to try out these different techniques for beginning band. So I asked, how do students integrate different methods of sight reading in their first time playthroughs? So I ended up setting up 3 different trials. Each one is kind of similar to the last. It's structured so that the sight reading portion is in the beginning, and then the rest was used as review for their concert coming up in December. So I would introduce a piece that they had never seen before, and I made sure that they had never seen it before because I wrote it. So they can't get away with that. So I added a new technique to each lesson. So the beginning trial is kind of bare bones. I like to think it's very much like what Katie Jewell and Aaron Wood use with their upper level bands. And I wanted to see how it would affect the first time playthroughs for beginning band. So trial 1 looked like this. So first we passed out the music. We talked about the roadmap second. And then we did our grouping and singing. So grouping and singing is we take little portions of the piece, and these pieces for 5th grade band are like 8 measures long. Not very long, very, very simple, same 6 notes, keeping it simple for them. So we divide it into 2 measures or 4 measures, and then we go with that. And then we do our first playthrough, and I had recorded their first playthroughs. And then after that, me and Mrs. Jewell, we would listen to the playthroughs and decide, okay, what happened here? So what happened here? So here is the sight reading that I wrote for them. It's pretty simple. Everything moves in a very stepwise direction. There's a couple skips, but I made it so that all the half rests are on the back end of the measures, that way that the kids are used to playing on like the downbeat, which is like the beginning of each measure. So it's very easy for them to wrap their heads around that. So there's the actual piece of music they played. So after listening to what they played, I realized that they had some serious issues with tempo. We started dragging really badly, and I have a feeling it's because they kind of forgot how to count a half rest. I think they kind of forgot how to do that. And then we had some missed partials in brass, which is just different ways to reach different notes using the same fingerings on the brass instrument, and which is very, very common for 5th graders, by the way. And they had trouble with lengths of half rests, as I said. And I would also notice that in the way that I taught this lesson was a lot more fast-paced than I would have liked it to be. So I ended up kind of rushing through it, and I realized that that probably did have an impact on the way that the first playthrough went. So after each playthrough, the kids were asked to give me 3 things. The kids were asked to tell me to rate themselves 1 through 5, 1 being I didn't do so hot on this, and 5 being I did great, woohoo for me. And they were supposed to rate themselves, circle a number, and tell me how they did on that first playthrough regarding rhythm and regarding notes. So you can see here that most of them kind of did well. They gave themselves it's a little more, what's the word? Spaced out for rhythm. And then notes, people are mostly getting. They were also asked to tell me which part of the sight reading process that we followed was most effective for them. So because this was a very, very bare bones approach for the first trial, they mostly gave me saying that, oh, grouping and singing was the most effective for me. And other basically refers to some of the kids that just wrote, I have to write 2 sentences. Ha ha ha. I don't want to do this. Here you go. Goodbye. I literally got that. So that's the 19.2% of kids. And then this is the only time I did it for trial 1. I asked them to write out what they would like to see in a sight reading process. So I gave a couple examples here. One of them kind of says they would like to have more time to look at it. Another one says that we should also give a little more time to look at it. And the other one was to kind of have like partner work. It's kind of hard to read their handwriting, but. So after this first trial, I thought, okay, what am I going to do next? So I took some of their suggestions and I integrated it into the next sight reading process. So this time, on trial 2, I passed out the music, we talked about our roadmap, and then we took 2 minutes, timed, no longer, to look at the music by themselves and sort of finger through on their instruments. And then we did our grouping and singing. We spent a little less time on the grouping and singing than we did on the first trial, and then we did our first playthrough. So here's the sight reading for this one. This one was a little more difficult for the kids. And I say that because I added this dangerous little half rest in the beginning of the measure, and that tripped them up very badly. They did not like that. They were like, I want to play on the downbeat, and if you make me do anything else, I'm going to cry. So that shows in the recording. So after listening to that, I came to the conclusion they had some issues with the half rest in the beginning of the measure. There were some issues with counting rests and note lengths in general. So there was a couple half notes in there, which are 2 beats, and they have a little trouble holding that to the full extent. And then I added breath marks for this one so that they could know when to breathe, which is a difficult thing for 5th graders to do when they're first learning their instruments. They need someone to tell them, okay, breathe now, and we breathe together. And then because there was a repeat on this one, I didn't have it written in on that piece of music right there. I had them actually write it in on their paper because the software I was using wasn't working. So there was a repeat, and the repeated time was significantly better than the first one. So I asked them to rate themselves again, 1 through 5 on rhythm and notes. And you can see that rhythm, they did a little better. We still had a couple people who were messing up, and I still feel like that had something to do with the half rest. And the notes were significantly better, which I do think is because they had that time to look over their music by themselves. It gave them a little more confidence. And in the recording, it's evident that they are playing more right notes. And then I asked them what part of the sight reading process was most helpful for them. So you'll see here that they actually said that the silent fingering was a lot more useful than the grouping and singing, which I thought was very interesting. And some of them say that the roadmap was useful, and some of them said that singing in itself was useful. They like being able to sing and be able to like immediately apply the rhythm and fingering along on your instrument. So Trial 3. For this one, I added partner work. So we had the passing out music, they had the roadmap, and then I let them work 2 minutes with a partner. It had to be someone next to them because if it wasn't, it would have been a mess. But then we did our grouping and singing, and then we did our first playthrough. I forgot to mention, the second trial, I did end up having a lot slower of pacing. The pacing was way slowed down, and I ended up spending a lot more time than I would have liked to on that. But this one, I feel like was paced pretty well. So we did our first playthrough. This is the music. So music people can look at that. And you'll see I didn't put anything on the downbeat, any rests on the downbeat to try and lessen the chaos from the last trial. So during this trial, pacing was a lot more efficient, as I had said. Students seemed to be a lot more confident in the rhythm aspect. They seemed to really, really fall in. They weren't having issues dragging. The tempo was right. I was a lot happier with how this went. Despite the sight reading being easier than the last one, many of them did struggle. Many of the things that they struggled with in trial 1 were improved. So things like tempo and getting the notes right, that was significantly improved. And the note reading stayed about the same as in trial 2, which was pretty good. I was pretty happy with that. So I again asked them to rate themselves, and you'll see that this is the best that it's gone. So most of them are rating themselves to be 5 or 4. We have a couple stragglers, but we have a class of 60 kids, and it's kind of hard to give the individual attention to each kid. And then I asked them to tell me which part was most helpful for them, and they said that the partner work was the most helpful for them, which I kind of expected because, especially knowing with the silent fingering through in the last trial, I thought this is going to go well. And it did. I was pretty happy with it. So my findings. So trial 1 had pretty brief pacing. Student note reading and rhythm reading demonstrated several inconsistencies. So in order to diagnose that, I gave them some extra time to look at their music. So for trial 2, I had some extended pacing. The students' note reading and rhythm reading demonstrated minimal improvement, which was better. It was much better. And then trial 3, with the moderate pacing, I ended up spending a good amount of time on it, and I ended up having enough time to get through the rest of the lesson without having to skip over anything, which was really nice. And students' note reading and rhythm reading demonstrated significant improvement, with most of them grading themselves with a 5. So the answer to my question, how do students integrate different methods of sight reading in their first-time playthroughs, is using at least 3 approaches for sight reading with options to slow down or speed up pacing based on development of student performance, provided multiple combinations of practice for students, and varied opportunities for a teacher to assess and support learning. So I've basically found that this gave me the wonderful opportunity to really, really diagnose what works best for this group of kids. There was like a couple students who were really struggling, and I really found that with the lesson, after doing these trials, they struggled a lot less. With whenever I gave them a new piece of music, they seemed to be more involved, they seemed to be more interested, and they seemed to know what they're doing. So my sources, basically my mentor teacher, Catherine Jewell, she helped me so much. She's amazing. The Michigan Department of Education Standards for Visual Arts, Music, Dance, and Theater, my supervisor, Kyle Shanton, the wonderful Kyle, and the Essential Elements book for beginning band. And I would like to acknowledge a couple people. So I'd like to thank my mentor teachers, Katie Jewell and Aaron Wood, for their continued support and help for my development as a teacher this semester. I would also like to thank the music and education departments at Albion College, along with my classmates, for their continued support and assistance over the last 4 years as I work to become a music teacher. I would also like to thank my parents and my best friend, Sam. Yes, she played a major role in my development as a teacher and a musician over the last 2 years. I don't know what I'm going to do without you, Sam. Love you. And a special thank you to Kyle Shanton and the current class of student teachers for being such inspiring role models and friends during this semester. Any questions? Yes.
You had the students rate themselves. Was that accurate to what you were hearing?
Yes. It was pretty accurate. Yes.
So out of like the 2 minutes when you were doing partner work, how many students did you notice like goofing around, if any, or talking off task if you did notice them?
I was watching them like a hawk. I'm not gonna lie. Once I let them, I was like walking around the classroom being like,
Wow, you were serious.
working. And that worked pretty well. So most of them were, I would have, if I had to do that again, I would probably give them more specific instructions and what to do with each partner, because they're very used to like showing each other the notes and not really talking about rhythms. So I would have liked them to talk a little bit more about rhythms. Yes.
Okay, one more. So when you do like group singing, is it like whole group, the whole band, or is it by section? And do you think if you did it by section, had them do that as like one of their trials instead of like group whatever, you did it by section singing, do you think that would help?
I'm not totally sure. I think that it would help if I had more time during the lesson. We have about 50 minutes and I had to get through the concert series that they're doing for December. And so I ended up having to modify a lot of what I was doing to fit into the class schedule, and doing section by section would have taken forever. But having them sing together really, really enforces that like idea, because during all of the bands at Coldwater, they're all trained to sing together. So I feel like that really enforces that and gets them used to singing in a big group. And I think it would also encourage them to, participate a little more. Yes.
So I'm assuming that you conducted these renditions when they came through. So to what extent did you include information that might be useful to them, or did you in your conducting, or just kind of let it go? For example, cut them off before the half rest on beat one, assuming of course that they're watching, which may not be first.
So unfortunately, I did record them, and in those recordings, I didn't have enough time for my presentation to listen to the recordings, but in the recording, you can hear me singing along while they're playing and conducting with them and keeping a steady tempo.
But I'm wondering whether like da ba ba ba.
I wasn't using like traditional conducting techniques. It was very, very vocal because there were so many of them, and we're not in a concert art form.
And these were unison exercises, right?
Yes.
Different sections of the band.
It was just all unison.
And did you, what information were you given starting out? I mean, you obviously wrote these exercises based on a kind of, as the biologists say, a taxonomy of what rhythm, like, okay, quarter notes, half notes, quarter rest, half rest. Everything else is off limits.
Yes.
So, and where was that built into their earlier learning?
Okay, so in the beginning, when they first picked up their instruments, they all have the essential elements book for band, and the essential elements basically goes note by note.
Okay.
They're teaching them the first 6 notes of the B flat scale. So after they worked with that, they had recently learned concert G a couple of weeks ago. So I did incorporate concert G into the new music that I was showing them, just to get them, keep them moving, keep their brains working on that. However, so they had worked a lot.
So you're just using where they're at in the method book.
Yes.
You were just working on that point. And the method book, is the method book designed also for unison playing by a band? It's
Yes.
like the whole way through, it's all unison playing?
At least as far as we've gotten.
Okay.
There is a couple songs that have them playing in different sections. There's actually a song, I think it's like London. There's a couple duets. There's a couple like things, but I wanted to make sure, I wanted to keep it as simple and straightforward for them as I could.
Yeah. At this sorry.
No, go ahead. You're okay.
I was gonna say, like, at this point, like, they're not that far into the book where they would have like separate pieces.
But I just wondered about and do you think in your assessment working with the different sections that plays out equally well for all instruments? I'm just kind of thinking of ranges and tessitures that differ for the French horns than they are for the trumpets.
I do think that it leaves brass a little bit behind. because brass has to reach those different partials, and the kids have issues with figuring that out and being able to like tighten their lips in order to reach the higher notes. And so we kind of have to move along to make sure that everything goes. And then as they get into the later band stages of the band program, we're able to diagnose that better. Anything else? Yes.
If nobody else has any questions tangentially related, what does film music class consist of?
Film music we're talking about Wagner until present day. So we're talking about John Williams, we're talking about Max Steiner, we're talking about like these big film composers and teaching, it's an elective actually. The kids don't have to take it and they come in and we get to teach them, and it's still a lecture-based kind of thing. And it's really cute. We watch a lot of movies. We just watched Casablanca. And it was fun.
I took the class because I went to Colbert High School and I took that class. So,
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. We get to listen to a lot of cool music and talk about a lot of cool people.
All right, thank you so much.